Genesis! Genesis! Genesis aloud is not! Is planet forbidden! Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Genesis, which is episode 19 of season 7 of Star Trek Next Generation. This video is a part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Star Trek Next Generation, one episode at a time. In this video, I cover the 7th season episode, Genesis. So Genesis is the episode in which the Enterprise is conducting tests and stuff and whatnot, and Data and Picard have to go on the shuttlecraft trip for a couple days to chase a wayward torpedo. Meanwhile, the crew starts to de-evolve and turn into animals and creatures, and so by the time Data and Picard get back, the Enterprise is spinning and has no power and is like a creep horror place where the lights are flickering and there's creatures jumping out at you out all over the place, and it's a horror fest. And then Data and Picard, who by himself is starting to de-evolve, so he's starting to get a heightened sense of fear, especially when he encounters a spider version of Barclay. And so they go in sickbay. Data is working on a cure to cure everyone, but Worf has turned into this big monster and he's knocking on the door, and Data wouldn't be able to finish the cure in time, so Picard takes Troy's pheromones and sprays them over different places to distract Worf, but then Worf goes after Picard and tries to gobble him up, but Picard uses his smarts and electrocutes Worf. And then after the commercial break, everything's fine again. And everyone's saved, and they're kind of laughing it up. Oh, haha, isn't it fun? A lot of people got brutally murdered because, Dr. Crusher made a foolish mistake. Ha ho ho ho! Freeze frame! Haha. And that's the episode. So I was looking at various reviews for this episode, as I tend to do, and this was very interesting, very, very enlightening. So I was Jammer's Reviews, which is an article written format online that you can find, quite popular, gave it a 1, lowest rating, 1 star. There was a reviewer I watched who said this was his least favorite episode of Star Trek Next Generation by far. He kept emphasizing by far the worst episode of Next Generation, or at least his least favorite, and he gave it 1 star as well. Lore Runner, if you're familiar with his channel, when he covered this several years ago, he gave it a lamentation. That's what he gives to episodes that, in his words, have no value whatsoever. They're completely devoid of anything positive. Or that's not his words, I'm paraphrasing, but still. So he called it one of the worst. And when he was talking about it, he referenced like everyone he knows also hates this episode and would hate it even more than he does. And talked about it like it was very well hated, like everyone hates this episode. And then I looked up some other information on this episode. I mentioned the review where the person called it his least favorite episode of the entire show. Well, he was on a podcast with another reviewer who gave it 4 out of 5 stars and said it was a great episode, very effective, that he was probably his favorite of season 7. Apparently What Culture in 2015 had an article, the 25 best episodes of the entire Star Trek franchise. Granted, it's before Modern Trek came out, 2015, but still the entire Star Trek franchise, and it was on that list. I think it was number 8 on the list for the best episodes of the franchise, saying that it was one of the scariest episodes ever made. There was apparently another list by something called The Gamer that ranked it in this top 25 creepiest episodes of Star Trek. That video from Lore Runner I mentioned is littered with comments of people saying, actually, I like this episode. Actually, I really liked this episode as a kid. Actually, I really liked this episode. And on IMDb, it's got a 7.0 rating, which is pretty good. It's not like amazing, but it's a fairly strong rating. Like, for reference, it's rated higher than episodes like Journey's End or Firstborn or Bloodlines or Emergence. So pretty much all the episodes that follow, it's ranked higher than Mask, but that has a very low rating. Sub Rosa, of course, has a very low rating. What else is it ranked higher than? Force of Nature, Dark Page. So it's an Interface ranked higher than Interface and Liaisons. So it's a fairly high rating. And if I looked at the reviews for it, the user reviews, and had 3 10-star reviews. So it's 10 out of 10, and only 1 1-star review. So this is just want to. It might be a long way of saying this, but I just wanted to hammer home just how polarizing this episode is. I've talked about other episodes like Whispers and a few other episodes that I called polarizing, but I think this might be the most polarizing episode, because you have people on one extreme saying this absolute dog shit as devoid of any positive things. Some people calling it the worst episode of the show. Then you have an online magazine rating it in the top 10 best episodes of the entire freaking franchise. And then you have lots of other people giving it a 10 out of 10, calling it one of the best episodes ever. So yeah, I think, and I looked ahead to my Patreon comments. I was curious if they were split on it. They're actually mostly positive. There's only 1 out of 4, I think, negative ratings. I mean, we have Kyrie091's puns and whatnot, but doesn't really give a rating. I think he said he liked it though. But yeah, so out of my Patreon comments, mostly positive, just the 1 negative, and 1's really positive. So yeah, this is a goddamn. I think this will probably get the winner. You leave a comment if you think there's another episode I'm forgetting that's even more polarized than this one. But I think this may be the Empath over in the original series. I remember that was pretty polarized, because I heard some people say is the best episode of one of the best of TOS, and other people say it's easily one of the worst. Me, I always thought it was just meh in the middle. I didn't really have that opinion either way, but I think this is definitely more polarizing than that. So if I'm forgetting of any DS9 Voyager or any other TNG episodes you think is more polarizing, let me know. I'll weigh in. But for my money, I think this might be the most polarizing episode of the franchise. Not just TNG, but of the franchise. But anywho, so where do I? Because this is my goddamn review, so where do I stand on this episode? Well, I'm definitely more on that positive scale. Sorry to say for the haters out there. So when I have a really strong memory of watching this episode late at night, where there was a storm on and with the lights off and curled up in a blanket, and I remember it creeping me the fuck out. There's a few, because I'm not a fan of horror movies. I mentioned this a lot. Most of them don't scare me. They just come off as either gross or dumb or just filled with a lot of cliches that I think are bad writing and eye-rolling inducing. But there's a few. I tend to like the thrillers that most true horror fans will say, oh, that's not really a horror. Then I like it better than what they would say is really a horror. So there's it, but I'm thinking of, even though I don't like Event Horizon that much, I think it's kind of goofy. It got really goofy towards the end. It's one of the experiences I had in my life where I was most creeped out. That and the Stephen King adaptation 1408 with Samuel L. Jackson and what's his face, Cusack. That freaked me the fuck out. I thought that was one of the creepiest movies I saw. And so those movies and this episode Genesis are the three instances I recall off the top of my head. Maybe I'm forgetting an experience, but those are the instances I recall of being the most freaked out, the most creeped out, the most, oh my god, it's creeping me the hell out of anything. And this is coming from, someone who is not a fan of horror. But these really creeped me out. Now, I was thinking, I remember I did this video a few years back, top 10 creepiest episodes of Star Trek, where I put on this goofy, put the light underneath my head and went hoo-hoo-hoo and did this whole goofy bit. And I was trying to remember, I couldn't remember where I put this on that top 10, because I was thinking, because I know I had other episodes like Phantasms and Frame of Mind and Timescape and Night Terrors on there, and I was thinking, I couldn't remember where I put this. I was like, this had to be higher than Night Terrors. Like, if I put Night Terrors higher than this episode, then I was totally wrong and I need to fix that. But I went back, rewatched it, and this is my number one. I totally forgot I had it as number one creepiest episodes, and when I saw that, I'm like, yeah, why didn't I remember that? Of course it's number one. It should be number one. That's totally correct. This is easily the creepiest episode of the entire Star Trek franchise. Now, would I put it in the top 25 of the entire Star Trek franchise? Well, for those of you following my channel, you know the answer is no. And most certainly did not, and I would not, let alone in top 10. That's crazy talk. But it is the creepiest episode. Because in that top 10 creepiest episodes, I had episodes like Timescape and Frame of Mind were further down. This was higher than those episodes. However, the key is I'm just judging the creepiness of it. If I judge the episode as a whole, then Timescape and Frame of Mind are far superior than this episode. This episode doesn't hold a candle to those episodes. Are far, far superior. But if I'm just judging it on the creep factor, then this wins. I think this beats out everything. Now, is it totally goofy? And is the science and logic nonsensical? Yeah, but I mean, this is Star Trek. Here's the thing. I've heard some people say, oh, this is like a season 1 episode. And I tend to disagree when anyone says that about any season 7 episode. And I've heard several people say it about it, several season 7 episodes, oh, this feels like a season 1. It actually doesn't. And I don't really think any season 7 episode does, because season 7 is just so much better in quality and character stories and production value, that I don't think any episode after season 3, or after season 2, I should say, season 3 onward, no episode feels like a season 1 episode, because they're all far superior to season 1. Especially if you're generalizing, oh, this feels like a season 1, that means it feels like a typical episode of season 1, which no, none of them do, because even the bad, they're just better. It's just the better quality, even the bad episodes. Even the Sub Rosa doesn't even feel like a season 1 episode, even though it's much worse than any episode from season 1. It still doesn't feel like one. But I was thinking about it. And sometimes when people say it feels like a season 1 TNG episode, what I think they're really saying, or what they're getting at, even if they're not aware of it, is that it feels like a TOS episode. Because season 1 of TNG was very similar to TOS. Like, they were still going off of TOS and using it as a template. And so when I think of, if someone put out the statement, this feels like a TOS episode, then that I would 100% agree with. I would totally see that as a TOS episode. Like, I could just imagine it be like Kirk and McCoy that go off in the shuttle and they come back and the Enterprise is all dark and freaky, and Spock is the big monster because he's the alien. He always turns into the invincible alien guy, so he's the big monster chasing after him, going "Rrr!" And McCoy is in sickbay, coming up with the cure. And damn it, Jim, I'm a doctor, not a zoologist. And Kirk has to be the one to take off his shirt and run through the ship while the big monster Spock is chasing him. Could totally see that. Absolutely, 100%. But of course, it would look a lot cheesier. You think this looks cheesy? Imagine a TOS version of this with the monsters dressed as a spider. They have like a college mascot, like a Halloween costume, going rah, rah, rah. And maybe someone would have like a spray bottle. I'm sorry. I still can't get over that. Where does someone poison Alright, sorry. Enough picking on TOS and their shitty special effects. But other than that, I could totally see that. So, after I watched this episode recently, I was thinking about it, and I think this episode can be summed up thusly. This episode is about the crew fucking up and dealing with their mistakes. Like, if there was someone having to sort of condense and just say the word in one sentence, that's the crew fucks up and they have to deal with the consequences. Particularly Dr. Crusher. This is mainly about her bad. But Worf fucks up because he says, "Oh, I've readjusted our weapon system is so much better," and the torpedo just goes and fucks off, and he totally fucks up. And that's why Data and Picard have to go off looking for it. Riker fucks up. Granted, he's affected by the virus, but he still fucks up by not calling Starfleet because he's too stupid. He's like, "Computer, open a channel or something." And Barclay fucks up by being hypochondriac and sort of starting this whole thing. And Troy fucks up by having lunch with Worf when he's being gross. And I don't know, now I'm just reaching. But it's mainly Dr. Crusher. Like, this is what really kills me about this episode, is that she Barclay came in with doing the WebMD, which he did in season 6 as well. The Dr. Web or whatever. I heard someone say in a review that this episode predicted that, but I feel like that was already a thing when this episode came out. And I know, like, the internet was not very common. It was like, I don't even know if it was used commercially or privately or whatever in the early 90s. I don't know. I can't remember when it really started common. It was more like the mid to late 90s when you had the dial up going that kind of thing. But even without the internet, I think this was a thing. I think people would look up like medical journals and whatnot, and so I don't think it was as common as the Dr. Webb thing. I think the web just made it more of a thing, just made it more common. But I do have a memory of watching this episode for the first time and seeing Barkley do that and be like, oh yeah, he's just being like, that's a thing. Like, he's being like those people who get all paranoid about it. So I do think, yeah, they would probably have like medical books or something, or dictionaries or something, and like look it up and be like, oh, I have this, and bring the book. I'm sure it was a thing. But anyway, regardless, so he comes in being a hypochondriac, and she finds something that's going to kill him in like 80 years or something, and so she tries to cure it, and in doing so turns the entire crew into vicious animals that start killing each other. Whoops, my bad. The best thing about it is at the end of the episode, like, they just experience, they're all turned into monsters, they're all turned into these creatures, and some of them like killed each other. Like, there's that one, we saw the one dude in particular who was ripped from shreds. I heard someone else wonder about what Picard's letter to his family was like. Oh yeah, by the way, my doctor accidentally turned everyone into animals, and your son just got killed by one of them, by my security chief. Sorry about that. So yeah, it was a horrific experience, very traumatic. Like, especially you can see it through Picard's eyes of coming back. Imagine like being on the ship and like creatures like going down a hallway stalking you like a giant lion or some shit, and you running for your lives. And then people probably died in like horrific ways, like that one dude. There was probably more people than that. Like, they were all turning into various animals. So a lot of people had to have been killed. And yet they're just laughing about Barkley. Oh, he has a disease name. He turned into a spider, and now he has a disease named after them. The fuck y'all talking about? A lot of people just horrifically died. Like, I've never seen a scene that's so like insensitive and just like out of touch, like just completely like unaware of like not acknowledging like the trauma that everyone just collectively experienced. Like, that was, at least they didn't play that goofy music and went dun dun dun. It was a dun 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 dun. But they might as well. Like, it's like you don't. And they end the episode on that goofy note. Like, everyone just ripped each other's shreds, and they turned into creatures. They like ripped them from limb to limb, and now they're just going. Like, Dr. Crusher got sprayed with poison in the face and had her whole face melted and had to have reconstructive surgery. And, yeah. What the fuck? So, you might wonder, like, you might wonder, because I said I really like this episode, and yet so far I've mostly been talking about how ridiculous it is. So I guess I can kind of see the perspective of the people who don't like this episode. But as I said, it was really scary. Like, one thing I will say, Gates McFadden directed this episode, and I know I love to dunk on her acting, but she actually did a really good job directing. And I'm never ashamed to admit when I say someone's a bad actor. If they're a good director, such as Avery Brooks, I'll point it out. And this is, unfortunately, the only thing she directed. I think the way, like the style of how she directed it is like perfect. It's like part of the reason of why I was so creeped out by this episode, because I could totally see this being done wrong, being done incorrectly. But the way they slowly built up the tension, and like it ramped, and then you get the scene where Picard and Data come back to the Enterprise, and it was like all spinning and dark and shit. Like, that was creepy as fuck. Like, that was, it was earned because of the scenes that came before it. Like, I heard the opinion that they should have came back from the teaser with Data and Picard coming back to the ship, but I totally disagree. I think as is, it happens in the third act, if I'm remembering correctly. Either second or third. I'm pretty sure it's third. I think we get 2 full acts of, people in the Enterprise and Worf and Troy, flirting and stuff. and Worf, eating like a slob or whatever, and being agitated, and Troy drinking tons of water, and then Worf sprays that scene in sickbay where Worf has the venom sac, and Crusher's like, oh my god, what is this? Worf, open your mouth. And it just, again, this is what I'm saying, great directing, because it just pauses long enough, just goes long enough to not make it feel like it's dragging, but to stretch out the tension. And then when he goes release, that was a fucking scary moment. I remember that freaking me the fuck out. Now granted, this is kind of like the horror trope of someone being stupid and looking right into the scary thing and be like, oh, what's this right here? And the monster, obviously. I'm thinking of Alien, what's it called? Alien, it's not Resurrection, it's Alien Covenant. That's the one where the evil android is like, oh, here, look, take a look in this giant creepy looking alien egg, and a guy just sticks his head in it. And of course the facehugger just and of course it was what kind of idiot would do that? And then my favorite though is Prometheus, where these 2 guys are freaked out, and so they're returning to the ship, and they see this scary looking ugly, vicious looking alien snake, going and freaking out, and they're like, oh, look at the cute little snake, let me touch it. And of course it fucking kills them. What? Now, it's not as bad as that, though. I mean, it's kind of, the whole Crusher thing, because this is Worf. It's one of her colleagues, a friend, someone that she's worked with. So she doesn't really even though it's something's weird, definitely going on with him. He's not talking, and he's got this venom sac. And it seems well, if there's a venom sac, maybe having him open his mouth right, where you're sticking his head right in his mouth, maybe not the smartest thing to do, but it's not that bad. I give it a pass. It's definitely not as bad as the Prometheus thing. That's definitely the worst thing. Or even the Alien Covenant thing. That was also terrible. So it's definitely not as bad as those. But I give it a pass because it was so effective. It was so freaking creepy. And the way it ramped it up, slowly. So that's why I completely disagree that it should have started right away. Because having those scenes of Riker slowly starting to become dumb and lose his mind, and Barclay starting to freak out and be very hyperactive, and that just was a great way to ramp the tension to be something's wrong, and then you hard cut to Data and Picard coming back, and everything's a fucking mess. Brilliant. Now, this episode was written by Brennan Braga, which, if you're familiar with him at all, it's obvious. It's very obvious. This is the kind of thing that he would write. He does body horror like Identity Crisis and Threshold, and what was that one over in Enterprise Season 3 where we're going to a what? What was that even called? I can't remember. But anyway, so, yeah. And also, he loves to do the creepy stuff. So, but the main 3 episodes that this is and has the same format is Timescape and Microcosm over in Voyager. Because in all 3 instances, you have people in the shuttle coming back to the Enterprise, and they find it completely in disarray, and they don't know what the fuck's going on, and they have to investigate. Well, in Voyager's case, is Voyager, not the Enterprise. Obviously, their ship. But, Timescape is a little different, because it has 4 people on a runabout, and they come back, and the Enterprise is, like, stuck and frozen in time, which is a little bit different. This episode and Microcosm are much more similar. And again, all 3 episodes, what they have in common, written by Brannon Braga, so he's doing the same thing. But yeah, Microcosm was pretty much, I remember seeing it for the first time, being like, oh, they're just doing Genesis. But in that case, it wasn't the crew de-evolving. It was like this weird macro virus that like took over the ship, and everyone was like dying from it or something. But in that case, it was Janeway and Neelix who returned from a shuttle trip, and they come back to the Voyager, and the ship is like all disabled, and they go on board. It's very creepy, and there's these bugs going, so it's very similar. It kind of turned more into like an action thing with Janeway like taking off her shirt and just wearing a jumpsuit shirt, and like going around like being a badass and killing the bugs. Aha. So it's different than this episode. It's definitely not as effective as creepiness, definitely not as like horror-esque. Like the whole, again, the way it's directed, it was beautiful. And here's the thing, and here's something I haven't heard anyone sort of point out, is that the way they dealt with Worf once he went full on, turned into a monster, like after the time Picard and Data came back, it kind of treated it like Jaws a bit, where the less is more. So they didn't really show him that much. And in fact, I heard someone else saying in general, oh, they shouldn't have showed people as much as they did. But I think, no, I disagree, because they already didn't show them that much. Like people say, oh, the whole thing with Barclay being a spider. But they only show him for like couple seconds, like he goes and goes on the window like that jump scare, and then that's all you get. And the Worf thing, like there's a whole sequence of him like trying to bash the door down and chasing after Picard, but you only get a good look at him once, and it's very briefly at a very like narrow beam of light, so it's not that good of a look, arguably. But the rest of the time, he's either in shadows or he's in the dark. You can see him from behind. A lot of the chase, once Picard's out in the hallway and he's chasing him, it's like dark lighting. It's like you can't see him very well. And when he's like banging on the door, they don't show the exterior perspective. They only show Picard and Data's perspective from in sickbay, so you just see the door being dented down, and you hear the that's brilliant. Like, I think a lot of credit has to be done to how this was filmed, because a lot of what makes this episode good is not the script, it is the style. It is the execution of the script. It is how effectively the tone, how effectively it's creepy. So I do have to give Gates McFadden a lot of credit for this. Now, granted, the special effects people and the lighting people, the director for photography and people like that, certainly probably had a huge impact on that. And by the 7th season, like, they have their shit down. And so you get something that is like, granted, I would say like the Macrocosm episode on Voyager, not directed as well. Part of the reason why it's not as good. So yeah, as someone who likes to dunk on Gates McFadden a lot, look at me just heap praise on her. Because I think that's definitely the strength of this episode, is the directing. Now, this is also the episode we learn that Alyssa Ogawa is pregnant. This comes up again in All Good Things, but then we see her like a brief cameo in a couple of the movies, but we never actually see the child, unfortunately. But this was storyline started earlier this season, and the episode attached where Beverly was, talking to Picard over breakfast and doing rumors about her dating someone. And then in Lower Decks, we see that she has been dating someone, and it turns out she's getting married. And I'm like, oh, I'm getting married. And then this episode, she's pregnant. And we never actually see this mysterious boyfriend. Oh, and, they had that one scene where after Crusher is, injured from Worf, Ogawa is in the conference room and is, informing Riker on what's going on. She's just a nurse. There's other doctors on board. They even mention them in this episode. Like Crusher says, oh, we better get Dr. So and such and Dr. Solar. Another name drop for Dr. Solar. We better get them up here. Why isn't one of them meeting with Riker instead of the nurse? I don't mean to diminish the lower deckers. Good for her, but still. And you know what the real answer is? Because she is a known character. They're not going to hire an actor just for one day just to have this one conferencing. They're going to get the character that's already there, that we're already familiar with. And okay, fine. And I love how they drop hints on what creatures they're going to turn into, because in that scene, when you see Ogawa leaving, she's kind of walking with her fists, kind of like an ape, just a little bit. Nice little touch. I love it. I think it's great. I love the foreshadowing. We never see what Geordi turns into, unfortunately, and he was barely in this episode. The other thing I got to point out is that this is another episode that foreshadows the whole Worf-Troy thing. I was just talking about that Eye of the Beholder, saying it was 3 episodes, parallels, Eye of the Beholder, and all good things. But arguably this is the 4th one, although we don't see them dating. They're inferring it a lot, because they're having lunch together, and then Worf goes to bite her because he wants to mate with her when he's a creature, and then at the end of the episode he's trying to get in the sickbay because he wants to mate with her. Now granted, they're monsters, they're de-evolved at this stage, but they're still hinting that there's a Worf and Troy thing. So that is a negative on this episode, but it's not that big of a deal. Anyway, I would now like to thank my Patreon supporters for supporting me on Patreon. Is very much appreciated. Does help me continue with my channel. So I'd like to give a big special thanks to Brandon Neil Howells, Jordan Johnson, and Antarius. Thank you all so very, very much for your strong support. I'd also like to give a shout out to Benjamin Mead, Greg Marley, Francisco, Chuck Hooks, Kyrie091, Anthony D. Benedictus, Ricky, Manny Jester, Joel Lavalles, Alessandro Miguelesio, Norman Buchwald, Stephen Kennedy, Brittenberg, and Allison Fordyce. Thank you so very, very much for your support. So, we have a few Patreon comments on this episode, I believe. First comment is from Norman Buchwald, who says, who would have thought Barclay would scare us? Yes, as far as science is concerned, this episode is totally preposterous, but I guess, like Darmok, if you're willing to suspend disbelief, this episode is quite fun. I completely forgot about the 4th episode we have on Worf and Troy here, though, and this may be the only one that focuses on them as a relationship most directly, not in any altered reality, and not the series finale. Outside of the whole thing about the pre-evolved Worf's mating desire, though, a few changes you could easily write out of the script. Yeah, Worf and Troy can be amusing working colleagues, instead of which would have been better. I actually like this more linear approach compared to macrocosm as to what's going on the ship in the meantime, and for us as viewers to slightly see the changes. Sigh. The pre-evolved Worf did kill at least one red shirt, didn't he? For all the effects, the dark corridors, and of course, as always, Patrick Stewart's fine acting, as well as the rest, especially Marita Sirtis and Jonathan Frakes. This is not only a watchable episode, but dare I say it, a good episode. So maybe for once, Braga's preposterous devolution theme that would by extension make the rock group Devo want to do a song titled Enough Braga for his preposterous and plain bad science. I'll give this episode 9 truly frightening Barclay spiders coming up behind the glass out of 10. Yeah, Extinction. That was the name of the Enterprise episode. Thank you. The one I was trying to think of. Yeah, as for this being the only other, outside of the finale, the only Worf and Troy episode where we see them together outside of, like, an alternate reality, I kind of disagree. Because they don't really show them together. I mean, they have lunch together, but they could be having lunch as friends. Like, they don't really outwardly state that they're dating. I mean, you could say, oh, they're being kind of friendly with each other, but they were an eye of the beholder before the fantasy. Like, in real life, that's why Worf went up to Riker and did all that weird, oh, whoa, would you be okay with this kind of bullshit? So, and most of the couple that's inferred by this episode happens after they're turned into creatures. So I think that counts as like an alternate state or whatever. When Worf like bites her cheek and tries to mate with her, that's after they de-evolve. So I don't think that counts as reality. I think that counts as weird shit. Personally, just me. But totally agree about. I don't think I said this yet, but who cares about the junk science? Like, I think I did actually. But there's tons of junk science in Star Trek. You just gotta go with it if it's a good episode. And this is very creepy. So it's a good episode in that regard. A 9 is very high. That is, again, polarizing episode. Totally polarizing. Anyway, next comment is from Stephen Kennedy, who says, the first 20 minutes of this episode is very good. Then Branagh Braga decided he wanted to play Transformers. Why were Worf and Deanna even together as a microbrain? Classic one-liner from Q, by the way. Is a pig and actually eats like one as well. I forgot an early review that Deanna Troi wanted to try BDSM lifestyle and Riker talked her out of it. This is the reason why Worf and Riker hated each other in All Good Things. Very clever. Sorry for the sidetrack, but back to Transformers, the next generation. This is a terrible idea. You know what I want to pass on? You know what? I want to pass on this episode. There are only 6 episodes left of TNG. 2 are very good, 3 are shit, and 1 is a masterpiece. I let you try to guess the 3 that I think are so bad, and I may betray your channel. That may be a hint. So my rating for Transformers, the next generation, 4, at least Riker got some kind of punishment for this episode. For the episode The Pegasus, as he became dumb, out of 10. So let's see what the episodes are coming up after this one. Hold on. So what's your ratio? Your ratio is 2 are very good, 3 are shit, and 1 is a masterpiece. 2 are very good, 3 are shit. And we have, so that's 6. So we have Journey's End, Firstborn, Bloodlines, Emergence, Preemptive Strike, All Good Things. So, You think All Good Things, Firstborn, and Journey's End are shit. Bloodlines and Emergence are good, and Preemptive Strike is a masterpiece. It's fucking with you because I know, especially by your hint there, that one of the episodes you call shit is Preemptive Strike, which to me is a masterpiece. So I don't know. Alright, if I was trying to seriously guess what episode you think All Good Things is a masterpiece, okay, so that's the easy one. You think Preemptive Strike is shit, you're wrong, but that's one of them. And maybe Emergence, I think you agree with me that that's shit. And you said 3 were shit, right? Let me get back here. Let's see. 3 are shit. Yeah. 2 are good. 1's a masterpiece. Okay, so maybe Journey's End. Okay, so I want to say Journey's End, Emergence, and Preemptive Strike are shit. So Firstborn and Bloodlines are good, and All Good Things is a masterpiece. But do you really think Bloodlines is good? That doesn't sound right. Maybe Journey's End is good, and Bloodlines is shit. So Journey's End, Firstborn are good. Bloodlines, Emergence, Preemptive Strike are shit. So that's what I'm going with. We'll see. But you want the real answer. The real answer is you got, 6 episodes left. Let's see. 3 are shit, 1 is good, and 2 are masterpieces. That's the real answer. I'm not going to leave you hanging. So I'm kind of giving away what my reviews are going to be like. But the ones that are shit, Journey's End, Bloodlines, Emergence, Firstborn is good, and Preemptive Strike and All Good Things are masterpieces. Yes, Preemptive Strike is a masterpiece. God damn it. Anyway, sorry. Spent way too much time on that. Anyway, next comment is from Kyrie091, who says, Genesis, more like, man, this is shit. Gates McFadden sucks in front of the camera. We now know she ain't great behind it neither. Actually, I don't mind her as Dr. Crusher, but she does her best work when humping a Scottish ghost and fighting against lightning zombie grandma. And neither of those happen in this episode, so the only way she could have directed this better is to have Vic Fontaine make a cameo appearance. I don't remember this episode too well, Mark. You gotta let me know, did I like this episode or Shades of Grey more? I think you like Shades of Grey more. That was very classic. No, I'm surprised you're not saying how much you love this episode because you like the horror stuff. Like, I think this is easily the best horror episode of the show. Yeah, anyway. Next comment is from Ricky, who says, I'm probably going to be an oddball for this one, but I really like this episode. To me, this is horror at its best in the entire Star Trek franchise. It does not come off as cheesy or dumb, and I must admit that this episode is very scary to watch. And the entire sequence, when Picard and Data are on the Enterprise, I had goosebumps and suspense the entire time. I have to watch something funny after this episode. I don't understand why people hate this episode. How about this? I hate Inpak Nor on DS9. That was cheesy and dumb, and a lot of people like it for some odd reason. Generally, I don't like horror, not because it's scary, but because it comes off as cheesy. Like, for example, I think the folk scream is incredibly overrated. And, sorry, do you mean the film Scream? I'm going to think of the film Scream. Maybe. That makes more sense. But anyway, it's incredibly overrated, and unfortunately, I watched the entire film franchise because my friend loves these movies, and I gave it a shot, but those movies are so by the numbers, so bland, and so cheesy. Also, the same thing with Event Horizon. I think the first half of the film was really good and creepy and eerie, but towards the end, and once the characters were getting killed off in a very over-the-top manner, it became very cheesy and dumb. But I do like horror when it's done right. The best horror movie of all time is Aliens. Yeah. Aliens is just one of the best movies of all time, period. But anyway, sorry. That's a great horror film. Seven, another great horror film. And the horror is a great genre in video games, like the new game that came out, Silent Hill 2 remake. That's horror at its peak, and if you ever play a video game, that is amazing, and you would love it. It's a lot like Lost Highway that plays with your mind in various interpretations. Ooh, I love Lost Highway. That's kind of a horror film bit. Anyway, sorry for all that. I just had to say my piece, so my rating is an 8 out of 10. You're not that out of place, Ricky, because Norman gave it a 9. And as I said, there is no norm for this episode because some people love it, some people hate it. It's polarizing as the norm, so you fit right in. Obviously, I agree with you on Aliens. I also agree with you on Scream. I only saw the first one. I didn't like it, so I didn't bother with any of the other ones. In general, I don't like horror. Totally agree with you on Impact Noir. I'm sorry, I just do not like that episode. See, that's the kind of horror I don't like. That's just cliche, by the number, ooh, look at this. Where this is the kind of horror I do like. The creepy, the atmosphere, the feel. That's the kind of horror I like. Anyway. And the dialogue in that episode was just cheesy as well. And it kind of retconned O'Brien to make him a war hero. But anyway, 7, another amazing. That's more suspense thriller than horror, but still. Close enough. I say it's definitely has some great horror moments in it for sure. Love Lost Highway. I don't think I never play video games, unfortunately, so I don't think I'll ever play Silent Hill. But I just don't have time for it with this YouTube channel. I barely have time to do anything else. But that's my lot in life. But anyway, obviously agree with the overall sentiment of this episode being very scary. Anyway, next comment is from Brandon Neal Howells, who says, I like this episode a lot, and I always have. As long as you don't take it seriously, it veers between comedy and actual shit, what the fuck, jump scare horror, and Barkley the spider, makes me jump every time I watch this. Voyager ripped this one off and called it macro. 7 cactus spines out of 10. I would have liked to have known what Alyssa Ogawa's child ended up being, as this is her last appearance. Well, we don't know what her child ended up being, which is a shame, but technically not her last appearance. She does appear again in All Good Things, but really that's an alternate reality that doesn't come, an alternate future that doesn't come to pass, so you could say that's not the real her. But then she does appear as a background Yes Doctor character in, I know First Contact, I think Generations as well. I'm not so sure about Insurrection. I'm pretty sure not Nemesis. I didn't look this up, but I definitely know she's in First Contact for sure. But she's just a background, one-line character kind of thing. Anyway, thank you, patrons, so much for your comments. So, my rating for Genesis out of 10, it's going to be a 7. Very good. I'm not going as far as an 8 for this episode. I do think it's the creepiest episode of the show for sure. But it is a little bit silly. And I do have my issues with that the fact that Crusher fucked up so badly and just jokes at the end and go, oh, I just killed everyone. Like that kind of irritates me. But the bad science doesn't. Like, oh, that's not people when this not scientifically accurate at all. This is nonsense. Yeah, it's Star Trek. Star Trek is nonsense science. How do you not know that by now? And it fits right in with the original series as well, because the original series also would have these high concept episodes. Like they all grow old. They all, I don't know, different things that are totally unscientific, like a giant amoeba eating the galaxy and shit. Totally unscientific whatsoever. So it feels right at home in Star Trek. It just does. I don't get that complaint about it, obviously. Honestly, I mean. But I do have other complaints. Like the whole Crusher thing, mainly. But I'm starting to rethink this, thinking maybe I should give it an 8 because it is such good horror and so creepy. You know what? I'm changing my 7 to an 8. Fuck it. I don't care how much the ending bothers me about Crusher. I'm giving this an 8. Extremely good. There we go. My rating went up because it does that sometimes when I'm making my reviews. Because it is good directing. Someone in the Patreon comments said that, I think it was Kyrie091, that Gates McFadden was a bad director. Totally disagree. I think she's an amazing director in this one episode. Good judging by this episode, it is well directed. Like the atmosphere, the creep, the fact that they don't really show that the Worf monster very much, and less is more. Like that's perfect. And just the creep, the Barkley thing. People remember Barkley as a spider for reasons because it's so effective. It is a cheap jump scare, but it is a good one. It's a scary atmosphere. Like the whole walking around the ship, it's a ship of horrors, and you hear shit in the background. It's like, this is very good production value. It's very good at the tone, very good at being scary. I just feel, I don't know, everyone has their taste, so if you want to hate this and call it one of the worst episodes of the show, that's fine. That's your taste, but I was like, you're missing out on something. Just go with it. It is so creepy, and it's so effectively good. It is good production value, objectively. Anyway, 8 out of 10. Raised it. There you go. Anyway, that is it for my review of Genesis. Hey, I am going to be doing Star Trek Next Generation, getting towards the end. So at the end of the month, once I finish covering Next Generation, I'm going to be doing a live stream where I count down your top 10 favorite and least favorite episodes of TNG. So I need to know what they are. So if you haven't already, go to any of my videos, including this one, leave a comment with your top 10 favorite episodes of TNG and your top 10 least favorite episodes, or worst, I don't care how you quantify it, however you want, worst episodes of TNG, and I will contabulate them, add them all together. I'm going to withhold these comments so no one will see them, so if your comment doesn't appear, don't freak out. Holding them back so I can hide the results. But if you haven't done it yet, absolutely, please do it before the end of the month so I can include it in this top 10. And if you enjoyed this video, please be sure to leave a like, subscribe, leave a comment below, all those sort of things. Help me out in the algorithm if you want to help me out, if you enjoyed the video. And if you really want to help me out, you could consider supporting me on Patreon. There's a link in that description there, below. I have Patreon-only videos where I revisit reviews that I've already done exclusively for Patreon supporters. Also, in higher tiers, you can get pre-releases, and even higher tiers, you can request a video for me to do stuff like that if you're interested. Link is below. So, let's see what's coming up on the old channel. Saturday will be my review for Profit and Loss on DS9. Loss, not lace. That's something else much worse. Anyway, Monday will be my review for Journey's End. Wednesday will be my review for Blood Oath. And then Thursday will be my review for Firstborn. So that's what's coming up on my channel. Be sure to check it out as I continue to cover Star Trek The Next Generation and Star Trek Deep Space Nine, one episode at a time, and many other shows as well. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.